Hello, today is Wednesday, February 11th. Welcome to episode 556 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina. I'm joined today by Advisory Board member Lester Munson and NSI Senior Fellows Andrew Boreen and Amy Mitchell. All right, morning team. If I'm hosting, it must mean we're talking Iran today. Later today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington and will meet with President Trump to discuss the United States' negotiations with Iran to halt its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The Israelis are skeptical, and rightfully so. Netanyahu plans to impress on President Trump that Iran's halting of uranium enrichment must be included in the negotiations. He will also present intelligence and discuss military options should these negotiations end up going in a different direction. This meeting comes on the heels of Iran and the United States holding talks in Oman last week to establish a framework for these negotiations. The United States has reportedly told Iran that it expects Iran to make tangible concessions on its nuclear program. However, Iran has yet to change its negotiating position. Les, let's start with you. Since coming to office, President Trump has bombed Iran. He sent the USS Abraham Lincoln to the region and potentially threatening to send another carrier strike group. All the while, he has offered to negotiate. Does Trump want to topple the regime or make peace with it? Which is it?
Well, this is the big question, and I think he doesn't necessarily know. He doesn't want anyone else to know. He wants to have maximum flexibility here. He wants to be able to pivot in any direction and have it be plausible. I think in a weird way, Morgan, I'm not criticizing you. A more interesting question is, what do the Iranians prefer? Would they rather be hit by the United States, or would they rather do a difficult nuclear deal? I suspect they would rather be hit by the United States militarily. They think they're more likely to survive that than a really tough nuclear deal. Now, a tough nuclear deal would include really harsh limits on their nuclear weapons program, missile systems, and support for terrorist proxies in the region, maybe some other things, but those are the big ones. And I think their view is if they do that deal, it's the end of the regime. They think it's more likely they could survive a U.S. and other military strike on Iranian assets. So that's in my view, that's the real question. There's never been a better time probably to attack the Iranians. They are as weak as they have ever been. They are back in a corner. Their foreign policy has utterly failed. They have no support among the population. They have no support among regional actors, really. So this now is the time to probably push the button, not the nuclear button, by the way, but push the button and go in and try to do something with the regime. This is the most opportunistic time, and I hope the administration is moving in that direction.
So, Andrew, is President Trump legitimizing the regime by engaging in these negotiations?
My assessment is absolutely not. I think it's quite clear that the administration and the president himself are not at all friendly, nor are they likely to legitimize the Ayatollah Khamenei's regime, their extremely brutal repression. And, there really have been very clearly two demands made. One, no nuclear program. Two, stop killing protesters. Here's a thing to think about. The regime is admitted to having killed more than 3,000, right? This is not a regime famous for telling the truth. External estimates, especially since all the Starlink terminals, there were 50,000 or so smuggled in, started kind of reporting doctors' reports and hospital reports. I read one Norwegian report showing more than 30,000 estimated killed. This is absolutely the most brutal theocratic repression. And it's not even theocratic at this point. This is the death throes, or kind of, I would argue, an extinction burst of a very, very weakened regime, weakest they've been since 1979. I tend to agree with Lester that this regime's really up against a wall, and in many ways they might prefer, a limited war or U.S. strikes or increased Israeli operations against them, because it might give them some semblance of justification for continued, population control repression. Or even some kind of surge potentially that they could spin into domestic support for a protection against the strike. So I think they're really boxed into a corner. And the difference here is we're seeing escalatory moves on the threatening presence of, we've got hundreds of Tomahawk tubes, thousands of Tomahawks could be rained upon strategic targets in Iran. We not only have the package that was in Venezuela for a kind of a raid, we also now have massive electronic warfare platforms, EA-6B prowlers, jamming systems. And the Russians, I would argue, have kind of bailed on Iran right now. Russia's got its problems in Ukraine. So I agree with Lester. Iran's extremely weakened. They're not a dangerous entity. But I think a lot of what Bibi's going to try to accomplish here is perhaps even kind of Israel would like to see strikes on Iran. And I agree with Lester. Iran, its regime, might like to see some strikes on Iran. So that said, what's the strategic imperative? What's the outcome that's good for America and global security would be a non-nuclear powered Iran. So that might be a more important thing. You give up perhaps regime extinction in exchange for a longer term erosion by not allowing them to have nuclear weapons.
So, Amy, Andrew, and Les are in favor of negotiations here. What say you? And I think one of the things that we haven't really
That is false, Morgan Vina.
You can't have a fault line with the moderator.
We're ready to bomb. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So do you want to rework your previous remarks?
No, that was my point, which is now is the time to hit them. They may even think it's good for them. Let's call their bluff and hit them.
All right. Well, so now you and Andrew have a fault line here. Okay. So, Amy, what say you? What about the protesters? We haven't really heard about, the opposition of late and sort of their efforts to fight the regime in Iran. What message do these negotiations send to them?
So going back about 3 weeks ago when it looked like we were going to strike Iran and the president was tweeting madly about the protesters and saying that he was going to stand up for them, right? We backed down kind of at the 11th hour. And everyone, I think, in DC saw like it ramped up significantly and then came back down. I suspect it was two reasons that he did that. One, the U.S., unlike Venezuela, which I would say we were punching down on that. That was kind of an easy button, if you will, in terms of strikes. So two reasons. One, the military could not confirm that there would not be civilian casualties, i.e. the protesters. And two, I suspect that Israel said, we're not ready yet. With the prime minister's arrival last night in DC, I think the message is changing that Israel is now ready to protect their interests in the region and that they are going to give Trump the green light to strike if he wants. I think I do agree that I think for Iran, it is, their better outcome in terms of long-term survival of the regime. But again, like we have in Venezuela, right, we're going to create a power vacuum. And there is no kind of framework in place to replace the current regime. We have the Shah's son here in the US. He's been talking a lot in press about what he would do and that they're ready. But you have the Revolutionary Guard standing by to take over should the regime come crumbling down. So, this is a tricky situation. And I think, again, unlike Venezuela, where we're punching down, Iran has no problem striking either our assets, our allies' assets, to punch us back. And that's really what the art or what needs to be kind of considered in this is that we punch Iran, Iran is going to punch us back. Where is that going to be? What is it going to look like? And God forbid it really escalate in that region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, the United States does not want a nuclear Iran. That is our ultimate objective. Whether or not the regime stays or goes is a different matter, but ultimately we cannot stand for nuclear Iran. And if that means providing that negotiating space while we ramp up our military efforts and put added pressure on the regime to continue to isolate it and weaken it militarily, then I think that is a good thing. What I would not want to see is us give the regime breathing space to reconstitute itself and re-strengthen. That would diminish the gains that we had, since last spring with our operation against the nuclear program. So, with that said, I'll be really interested to see what the conclusion of Bibi's trip is like and what both sides take away. That's a wrap. Thanks as always to Kelly Crowley, Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, February 13th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you liked what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.